Story 1. The Man in the Hoodie.
When you first start living alone, you expect a certain kind of quiet. The hush of an empty room, the soft thud of your own footsteps, maybe even the lonely clink of a mug against the counter in the morning. But there's a different quiet that settles in certain places. A deeper stillness that feels less like peace and more like waiting. That was the kind of quiet I found when I moved into the townhouse in southern Illinois in the fall of 2018. I was 26, fresh from a breakup that had left me raw and wary. The townhouse was a practical choice. Close to work, affordable, and tucked away on a cul-de-sac so calm it bordered on stagnant. The neighborhood was a patchwork of identical beige vinyl siding, manicured lawns, wind chimes tinkling in the breeze, and the slow routines of retired couples. It was the sort of place where nothing ever happened. At least that's what I told myself. But almost immediately, I noticed something, or rather, someone, who didn't quite fit. 3 doors down, there was a man. Middle-aged, heavy-set, a beard that looked like it hadn't seen a razor in weeks. He never seemed to be going anywhere or doing anything. Night after night, he would simply stand outside his house, planted in the middle of his yard, motionless. Sometimes he'd stand there for hours, hands in his pockets, staring straight ahead. He never waved, never smiled. Even if I looked right at him, his gaze didn't change. It was as if he was looking not at me, but through me. At first I brushed it off. People are strange, I thought. Maybe he was just lonely, or lost in thought. Still, I found myself pulling my curtains shut a little tighter at night. I started double-checking the locks before bed, but I told myself it was nothing. Then, one night, I woke with a jolt. My phone said 2:37 a.m. The house felt colder than usual, the air heavy and still. That's when I heard it. A metallic scraping, like metal dragging against wood. It came from somewhere outside, muffled but insistent. My heart hammered in my chest as I strained to listen. Then, unmistakably, I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching over the gravel in my fenced backyard. I froze, barely breathing. The sound of the footsteps lingered, then faded. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands, whispering my address, the words catching in my throat. Within minutes, red and blue lights washed over my living room walls. The officers searched the yard, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. They found nothing. One of them shrugged and said, "Probably a raccoon. Happens all the time." But I could see the doubt in his eyes. I tried to sleep, but every little noise had me sitting bolt upright. I left the light on in the hallway, just in case. 2 nights later, the air felt thick with tension. I lay in bed, unable to drift off, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant wind. At 2:14 a.m., I heard it again, a soft, insistent rattling, this time at the back door. The handle was turning, then rattling harder, as if someone was testing it, trying to force it open. I slid out of bed, clutching a kitchen knife, and crouched in the hallway, hardly daring to breathe. The motion-activated light outside flicked on, flooding the backyard with harsh white light. Through the blinds, I saw a tall shadow move across the glass. Someone was standing there just inches away, separated from me by a thin pane of glass and a rattling door handle. I called the police again, my voice barely a whisper. This time they found footprints in the gravel, size 11 or 12, deep and clear. Still, they told me there was nothing they could do. "No crime has been committed," they said. "Just be careful." Sleep became impossible. Every night I lay awake, flinching at every creak and groan of the old townhouse. The sense of being watched was overwhelming, pressing in on me from every corner. I decided to take matters into my own hands. The next day, I bought a set of security cameras and installed them around the back and side of the house. That night, I sat in the living room watching the feed on my phone, trying to convince myself that this would be enough, that the cameras would scare off whoever was out there. It was 2:23 a.m. when the back camera triggered. My phone vibrated, the screen lighting up with a black and white image. I watched in horror as a man in a black hoodie, gloves, and jeans walked calmly into the yard. He moved with a strange confidence, as if he knew exactly where the motion sensors were. He stepped right up to the back door, then looked up, straight into the camera. For a moment he just stared, his face obscured by the shadow of the hood. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was a cold, deliberate smile, the kind that makes your blood run colder than ice. He didn't try to hide. He just stood there, staring, as if daring me to do something. Then, without a word, he turned and vanished into the darkness. I showed the footage to the police, hoping that the proof would finally convince them to act. But their answer was the same. We can't do anything unless he breaks in. Just keep your doors locked. I knew then that I couldn't stay. The sense of dread was too much. The feeling that at any moment someone could be on the other side of the door, just watching. The next day I packed my things and left, abandoning the townhouse and the strange, silent neighborhood. When I came back a week later to grab the last of my things, I found a note in my mailbox. It was written in shaky, uneven handwriting, scrawled across a torn piece of paper. It read, "The cops leave, but I don't." I didn't sleep that night. A month later, I got a message from the new tenant. It was brief, polite, almost casual. "Hi, sorry to bother you. I think you used to live here. Did you ever see someone in a hoodie hanging around the backyard? Last night, someone knocked on the glass door around 2 a.m. and just stood there." I never replied. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some doors are better left unopened. And sometimes the quietest neighborhoods can hide the loudest secrets.
Story 2. The House That Called.
In the quiet stretches of rural upstate New York, there are houses that seem to fade into the landscape, their histories forgotten by most. In 2021, I worked for a property preservation company tasked with managing these silent places, foreclosed homes left behind by families, by time, by circumstance. Our job was simple on paper: clean them out, secure them, winterize them, and make them ready for whatever came next. But the reality was often stranger and lonelier than anyone might expect. That morning began like any other. The sky was gray, the air damp and heavy with the promise of rain. I was sent to a small house at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by a thick wall of trees. The address was barely listed on the map. The owner, I was told, had been an elderly woman who passed away quietly, her life ending as softly as a whisper. With no heirs and no one to claim her possessions, the property had become just another line on a spreadsheet, another task to be completed. Arriving at the house, I noticed the absence of everything. No neighbors, no hum of traffic, not even the distant bark of a dog. There were no utility lines running to the house, no sign of recent visitors. Just silence, deep and suffocating. The house itself sagged under the weight of years, its paint peeling, its porch creaking as I stepped onto it. I unlocked the door and entered, the air inside musty and stale. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, no service, as expected, but the display glowed with unknown caller. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, pressing the phone to my ear. Only static greeted me. I spoke, "Hello?" once, then again, but nothing changed. Just the crackle of empty air. Shrugging it off, I slipped the phone back into my pocket, chalking it up to a technical glitch. After all, in places like this, technology often failed. I began my inspection, moving methodically from room to room, taking photos of everything for the report. The living room was a time capsule. Dusty furniture, arranged in a circle, faded sunlight filtering through lace curtains, and shelves lined with delicate porcelain figurines. Each one seemed positioned with deliberate care, as if waiting for someone who would never return. In a small room off the hallway, I discovered what must have been a sewing room. The air was thick with dust, the scent of old fabric and mothballs. On the wall, a bulletin board was covered with neatly cut-out obituary clippings. Dozens of them, each pinned with precision. Names, dates, brief lines about lives and deaths. Some yellowed with age, others more recent. I wondered who had collected them, and why. The master bedroom was next. It was dominated by a large bed draped in a faded quilt, the mattress sagging in the middle. On the nightstand sat an old rotary phone, its plastic yellowed with time. No cord connected it to the wall, no dial tone, just silence. It was clearly just a relic, a piece of the past left behind. Then my phone rang again. Same unknown caller, same dead zone with no signal. I stepped out into the hallway, feeling a chill settle over me. I answered, expecting more static. But this time I heard something else, a whisper. So faint I almost missed it. The words seemed to slip into my ear, barely more than a breath. Don't answer the phone in the bedroom. The call ended abruptly. I stood frozen, heart pounding, trying to process what I'd just heard. Was it a prank? Some strange interference? I checked the windows and doors, but nothing was amiss. The silence grew heavier, pressing in from all sides. Then, cutting through the stillness, came a different sound. A ring. Not my phone. From the bedroom, the rotary phone began to ring. Loud, mechanical, insistent. The kind of ring that rattles your bones, that demands to be answered. I stared at it from the doorway, unable to move. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get as far from that room as possible. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Eventually, the ringing stopped. The silence returned, deeper than before. I forced myself to continue the inspection, needing to finish the job and leave. The basement was the last place to check. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step echoing in the darkness. The air was thick with the smell of rust and mold, and my flashlight beam danced over broken furniture and boxes of forgotten belongings. In the back corner, I found a small table. On it sat a cordless phone, long out of battery, and a stack of old notebooks, their covers coated in dust. I picked one up and flipped it open. Inside, page after page, were names, dates, and brief notes, each entry written in careful handwriting. Lena H., July 3rd, 20 rang once, didn't answer. Carl M., September 12th and 20 picked up, warned him. There were dozens of entries, each marking a call, a warning, a refusal, or an answer. It was as if someone had been keeping track of every strange ringing, every warning delivered, every moment someone chose to listen or not. I closed the notebook, feeling the weight of all those silent calls, all those whispered warnings. I left without finishing the inspection. My report hastily scribbled, property unsafe, possible squatter. 2 days later, my co-worker Mark was sent to the house. I tried to warn him, but he brushed it off. That afternoon, he texted me, "The phone rang while I was in the bedroom. That thing doesn't even have power." Mark quit the next day. No notice, no explanation. He just disappeared, leaving the house at the end of the dirt road to its silence, its secrets, and its unanswered calls. Some places, it seems, remember the living and the dead in ways we may never fully understand.
Story 3. The Apartment Below Me, Oregon.
In the heart of a gray Oregon winter, the world transforms. The cold wraps around you like a second skin, seeping through window panes, humming in the radiators, and settling in your bones. I moved into my small upstairs apartment just after Christmas, when the city was still quiet, streets dusted white, and the air held the anticipation of the new year. My building was old, built in the 1950s, with only 2 units stacked atop one another like the layers of a forgotten cake. The upstairs was mine. The downstairs, I was told, had stood empty for months. It was, at first, everything I needed. Affordable, peaceful, and just a short walk from my job. The landlord was quick to point out the unit below was vacant, renovations pending, no tenants for the foreseeable future. I relished the solitude. The wood floors creaked under my slippers. The big windows let in the pale winter sun, and the sound of rain on glass became a gentle metronome to my days. Working from home, I filled my hours with music, endless mugs of tea, and the soft hush of Eugene's endless drizzle. But winter nights can play tricks on the mind. And in my second week, I started hearing them. Footsteps, unmistakable, drifting up from the empty apartment below. At first, I convinced myself it was the building settling, or the pipes clattering in the old walls. But the sounds were too deliberate, too human, a slow, even pacing that echoed through the floorboards, always between 1 and 3 a.m. The rhythm was uncanny, as if someone were walking back and forth, measuring the length of the empty rooms. Curiosity turned to unease. I messaged my landlord late one evening as the footsteps traced their familiar path beneath me. His reply was swift. The unit was still vacant, no renovations had started, and I was the only resident in the building. He assured me the place was old, wood creaks, pipes rattle, nothing to worry about. But I knew the difference. The sound of footsteps is not just heard, it's felt. A vibration that travels up through the soles of your feet and settles in your chest. A week later, the noises escalated. One night, as I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, I heard a sharp thud from below. A chair tipping over, perhaps, followed by the unmistakable scrape of something heavy dragging across the floor. My heart pounded as I crept into the kitchen, positioning myself above the source of the disturbance. Then, from directly beneath my feet, came 3 steady knocks. Knock, knock, knock. They were evenly spaced, almost polite in their insistence. I didn't move for a minute, barely daring to breathe. When morning came, I steeled myself and peered through the dusty downstairs windows. The apartment was barren. No furniture, no signs of life, just dust swirling in the beams of early sunlight. But that night, the noises returned. Desperate for answers, I set my phone on the floor, recording the silence as I tried to sleep. At 2:41 a.m., the recording captured it all. The footsteps, slow and measured. Then the sound of breathing. Close, intimate, just below my floorboards. And then, a voice, so faint and chilling it froze the blood in my veins. I'm still here. Listening to the playback, I replayed the clip over and over, each time more certain of what I heard. The voice was neither male nor female, but heavy with loneliness. It was under me, impossibly close. I sent the recording to my landlord hoping for reassurance or at least an explanation. He didn't reply. 2 nights later, I was jolted awake by a violent bang. My heart hammered in my chest as I crept from bed. The floor beneath me vibrated, almost imperceptibly, but enough to let me know I was not alone. From below, the scraping returned, this time more frantic. Nails, perhaps, dragging along the beams. Then, the horror deepened. My bedroom doorknob began to turn, slowly at first, then with increasing urgency. It wasn't the front door. No one could have entered the building. It was my bedroom door, and something was trying to get in. Clutching a lamp, I braced myself, ready to confront whatever waited on the other side. The knob twisted again, hard. But when I flung the door open, the hallway was empty. Every window was locked, the front door still bolted. And yet, I could feel it, the presence, the intent, lingering in the air. That night, I grabbed my keys and slept in my car, engine running, breath fogging up the windows as I tried to make sense of the terror that had invaded my sanctuary. By morning, my landlord had finally responded. His email was terse, a single line. Please call me ASAP. I need to explain something. My hands shook as I dialed his number. He answered with a weary sigh, his voice heavy with regret. He confessed that the last tenant in the downstairs unit had died alone the previous year. Her body remained undiscovered for weeks. She had often called him in the middle of the night, claiming to hear footsteps above her, long before anyone else had moved in. His words chilled me more than the winter air. "Sometimes I wonder if she was hearing you," he said, "or if it was already there before either of you ever arrived." The realization landed with a weight I could not shake. That night I packed my belongings and left. I never returned to that apartment, not even to retrieve the last forgotten mug in the cupboard or the coat left hanging by the door. The building faded from my life, but the memory lingered. Sometimes, in the silence of a sleepless night, I hear the creak of floorboards beneath my feet and wonder, was I ever truly alone in that place? Or had something, or someone, always been waiting there pacing the darkness, whispering, "I'm still here"?